For many years Sarah believed her marriage was strong because it was quiet. She and her husband, Jonathan, rarely fought. Their life moved forward in steady, predictable lines that felt safe. They bought a house together in a quiet neighborhood and filled it slowly with furniture chosen for comfort rather than beauty. Mornings began the same way every day, with coffee shared at the kitchen counter and brief conversations about schedules and responsibilities. Evenings ended with television low in the background and tired smiles exchanged before sleep. Sarah once believed this rhythm meant love had matured. She told herself that passion was something people exaggerated in movies and that real commitment looked exactly like this. Jonathan was dependable and calm. He listened when she spoke and never raised his voice. He came home at the same time each night and never gave her a reason to doubt him. Yet over time Sarah felt a subtle shift inside herself that she struggled to explain. It was not unhappiness in the usual sense. It was a feeling of fading, as if parts of her were slowly being erased by routine. She noticed it in small moments. When Jonathan spoke, she sometimes drifted away into her thoughts. When he touched her hand, she felt comfort but not excitement. She blamed herself for these feelings and buried them beneath responsibility. One afternoon Sarah attended a work event she had planned to skip. She stood in a crowded room listening to conversations that sounded identical to her own life. That was when she met Daniel. He was not extraordinary in appearance, but he listened with attention that felt rare. He asked questions and remembered her answers. Their conversation lasted longer than it should have. When Sarah returned home that night, Jonathan asked about her day, and she described it briefly, leaving out the part that lingered in her mind. That omission felt small and harmless. Over the following weeks Daniel appeared again through messages related to work. The conversations remained professional at first, but gradually softened. Sarah told herself this was normal. She told herself she deserved to feel interesting again. Jonathan noticed nothing. He trusted the life they had built together. Sarah began to realize that trust was not something that broke suddenly. It thinned quietly through choices that felt insignificant in the moment. One evening she stood alone in the kitchen after Jonathan went to bed and stared at her phone, feeling a mix of anticipation and fear. She understood then that she was standing at the edge of something she could still step away from. But she also knew that part of her already wanted to see what waited on the other side. The days that followed settled into an uneasy balance for Sarah. On the surface, nothing had changed. Jonathan continued his routines, moving through the house with the same quiet reliability. He spoke about work, about plans for the weekend, about small repairs the house needed. Sarah answered him with the same familiarity, but inside her attention was divided. Messages from Daniel arrived more often now. They were still framed around work, but the tone had shifted. He asked how she was really feeling. He noticed when she seemed distracted. Sarah found herself waiting for his words in a way that unsettled her. She told herself it was only conversation, yet she guarded her phone more carefully than before. One evening Jonathan suggested they invite friends over for dinner. Sarah agreed automatically, then later felt an unexpected resistance. The idea of presenting their marriage as complete suddenly felt dishonest. During the dinner she watched Jonathan laugh with their friends and felt a strange distance. She wondered if he could sense how far her thoughts had drifted. After everyone left, Jonathan cleaned the kitchen while Sarah stood by the window checking her phone. A message from Daniel appeared asking if she ever felt like she had chosen safety over herself. The question struck deeper than she expected. Sarah did not reply immediately. She knew the answer mattered. Later that night she answered honestly for the first time. She admitted that sometimes she felt invisible in her own life. The response came quickly, filled with understanding and affirmation. Sarah felt seen in a way she had not in years. Over the next weeks their conversations became a refuge. Sarah began sharing thoughts she never voiced at home. She told herself that honesty with Daniel did not diminish her marriage. Yet she noticed how her patience with Jonathan shortened. Small habits that once felt harmless now irritated her. When Jonathan reached for her, she sometimes pulled away without explanation. Jonathan noticed the change and asked if something was wrong. Sarah said she was tired. The lie came easily, and that frightened her. One afternoon Daniel suggested they meet for coffee to talk about a project. Sarah agreed without hesitation, then felt a surge of anxiety. She told Jonathan she would be late that evening. The meeting lasted longer than planned. Their conversation drifted far from work. When Daniel touched her arm, Sarah felt a rush she had forgotten was possible. She did not stop him. When she returned home, Jonathan was already asleep. Sarah stood in the doorway watching him and felt a wave of guilt and longing collide. She realized the line she believed she would never cross had already moved. It was no longer a question of if something would happen. It was a question of how much of herself she was willing to lose to stop it. Sarah woke with a heaviness that did not fade with the morning light. The house was quiet. Jonathan had already left for work, leaving behind the familiar order he always maintained. She moved through the rooms slowly, aware of every object, every shared decision that had built this life. Her phone rested on the counter. A message from Daniel waited, asking if she was thinking about yesterday. She was. She typed a response and erased it several times before sending a simple yes. The word felt loaded. Over the following days, Sarah found it harder to separate the two worlds she was living in. At home, she performed the motions of marriage with growing distance. With Daniel, she felt present and alive. He noticed details about her moods, her gestures, her silences. One evening Daniel asked if she was happy. The question unsettled her. She realized she had not asked herself that in years. She answered honestly that she did not know. Daniel said that knowing mattered. Soon after, he asked her to meet him again. This time there was no pretense of work. Sarah hesitated longer than before. She thought about Jonathan and the years they shared. She thought about the safety of routine and the fear of change. Still she agreed. They met in a quiet place, away from familiarity. Conversation gave way to closeness. When Daniel kissed her, Sarah did not pull back. The moment felt both inevitable and devastating. Later, as she drove home, the reality of what she had done settled in her body. It was not excitement that followed, but a deep, quiet fear. At home, Jonathan greeted her with a tired smile and asked about her evening. Sarah answered vaguely. She noticed how easily she lied now. The realization frightened her more than the affair itself. Over the next weeks, Sarah moved through her days in a haze. She and Daniel continued seeing each other, drawn together by what they shared and what they escaped. Yet guilt shadowed every moment at home. Jonathan began to sense the distance. He asked again if she was unhappy. Sarah deflected and said she was overwhelmed. One night Jonathan reached for her and she turned away. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Sarah realized the affair was no longer something happening outside her marriage. It was reshaping it from within. She had crossed into a place where return would not be simple, and where every choice carried consequence. The tension in the house became impossible to ignore. Jonathan moved through the days with a quiet concern that Sarah felt in every glance and pause. He tried to reach her gently, asking if she wanted to talk, if something was weighing on her. Sarah avoided his eyes more often now. She felt torn between two versions of herself, and neither felt whole. The affair with Daniel had lost its initial intensity and taken on a heavier shape. What once felt like escape now felt like pressure. Daniel spoke about possibilities, about a different life, about choices that could be made. Sarah listened, but felt overwhelmed. She realized that wanting something did not mean knowing how to live with it. One evening Jonathan came home earlier than usual. He found Sarah sitting alone in the living room, staring at nothing. He sat across from her and said he felt her slipping away. His voice was calm but carried a pain she could no longer ignore. Sarah felt something inside her break open. She confessed. She did not dramatize it. She simply told the truth. Jonathan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked how long. She answered honestly. He asked if she loved the other man. Sarah hesitated and said she did not know. The answer landed between them final and heavy. Jonathan stood and walked through the house slowly, as if seeing it for the first time. He returned and said he had trusted the life they built. He said betrayal was not just about another person but about choices made in silence. Sarah cried quietly, unable to defend herself. In the days that followed they tried to talk, but every conversation returned to the same truth. Trust had been broken in ways that could not be repaired with effort alone. Daniel faded from Sarah's life as the reality of her marriage took precedence. She ended the affair knowing it changed nothing. Jonathan eventually said he could not stay. He needed to protect what remained of himself. The separation was not loud or bitter. It was slow and deliberate. Sarah moved out, leaving behind the house and the life that once felt safe. Alone she began to understand the cost of not speaking when it mattered. She realized that love neglected did not disappear quietly. It transformed into distance and then into loss. Jonathan rebuilt his life carefully, carrying the lesson of what trust required. Sarah carried a different lesson. That silence could be as destructive as betrayal. That wanting more without honesty could cost everything.